Welcome back, everyone, to the Tron podcast. This is your host, Rashad Woods. Today, I have a very special guest who's overcome adversity, started her own business, as well as a nonprofit as well, too. From the beautiful state of South Carolina, Kayla Williams. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
It's an honor. It's an honor. Now, you have a very compelling background, and I love the topic that you are a subject matter expert in, artificial intelligence. You've also overcome personal challenges as well, too. First, before we get into your background, let you tell your background, not me.
Yeah, So basically, I started a nonprofit shortly after having brain surgery a couple of years back. I really did. I came out of that experience knowing that I have limited time left. And as I started approaching life after that surgery, I was like, man, what is holding me back from these things? Oh, the fear of failing.
Right.
So I was like, let's get past that. I said, worst case, I fail.
Absolutely.
And so the first thing that I wanted to do was to open my nonprofit, and where we help people with their automotive repairs.
That's
my entire family's automotive.
That's Automotive Service Assistance, right? Yeah.
Yes, Automotive Service Assistance. We're just here in South Carolina right now, but I hope and pray, in the future we'll be everywhere, because there's not a lot of help for people who struggle with transportation. And my entire family is automotive, but I branched out into business and nonprofit. Yeah, it's kind of just like all that knowledge put together. I was like, let's do it. So my mother and I started that. And then I had always had a full-time job, but I worked a side gig doing like tech consulting, operations consulting. And I just kept getting this urge. I was like, you know what? I can do this. Again, what's holding me back? The fear of failure.
Right.
Worst case, I fail. Money gets a little tight for a little bit.
Yeah. Right.
Exactly. I'm like, but at the end of the day, I had to make the decision to believe in myself, because honestly, I was surrounded with people who they all believed in me. They knew I could do it. I was like, why don't I know I can? So I started my company, Twisted Consulting, where I do AI strategy consulting and business operations consulting, mainly focused on small and medium businesses and nonprofits.
Yeah, I saw that. Now, what made you pick artificial intelligence in particular?
Man, so I'm a little different. Even though I have my certification in full stack development, I don't actually develop AI. Mine revolves around like the strategy of it. And honestly, it just became a passion years ago. I always dabbled in it. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, I really started diving into it, because these companies that I was working with, especially the small businesses and the nonprofits, there's a fear around it, but they wanted to embrace it, but they had no idea, how to. So I started doing research into, well, who does this type of thing? And there's not a lot of people that actually do that. You can, hire tech consultants, and they kind of have a base knowledge, but especially on like strategy, implementation, policy, compliance, all that kind of stuff. There was nobody at the time that was doing it. So I was like, well, I can be that person, because this is absolutely fascinating to me.
Right.
So, I started getting certified in certain things, learning and researching.
Beautiful.
Yeah. When I had to narrow down my focus on my business, I was like, where do I thrive? What is my niche? What brings life to me every day? And it was that AI strategy and business operations. That's where I love it.
Well, I think too, and I love some of the points you made, and we're going to get to it from the details, because a lot of people, automatically, companies in particular, will say, I need to do AI right away. And then, like some of the points you made was, did you start with a plan, the policy, are your employees trained, and then laws and compliance? So there's multiple stages that before you dive into the deep end of the pool, so to speak, that you actually know what exactly you're getting yourself into, because the ball is rolling. I saw one of your messages you put, it starts with a chat box and it ends with a lawsuit.
Yes, man. Actually, yeah, that got a lot of traction.
Yeah.
I think I'd posted that on my LinkedIn because, there's been stories. There's been a bunch of stories of companies trying to dive in and utilize AI. And, there's been a couple lawsuits that have happened out there. And I was like, you know what? I need to post about this.
Because unfortunately, things get hot for the moment, and then it becomes the newest trend. And we've seen it with all different types of things. Like all of a sudden, everybody goes all in, and they didn't get the desired result. I'll give you a perfect example. Like, when everybody was
Mhm.
like, we're going to do automated checkout at grocery stores, right? And then what happened about 6 months later? People were like, I hate this. I absolutely hate this. Right? You're flagging down the person to try because it does one little mistake, or you type in your phone
One.
incorrect. Oh, it's like pulling teeth, right? And you're
It is.
tired and you just want in and out. So obviously there's some pratfalls to it. But like, so when you focused on small businesses, how did you end up, starting out as this is what I want to do, and then started gaining clients and tractions when it came to small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and nonprofits?
Really, it's all been through my network over the years. I'm a networker. Mind you, I definitely have a people meter that runs out sometimes, but I'm a networker, and so I went to the very people that I was hearing these things from,
Right.
and so really what it started out as was me having these conversations because I needed some guinea pigs, right?
Of
So
course.
having these conversations and like, what are the issues that you're running into?
Right.
In the different type of the different industries, things like that.
Right.
And that way I could educate myself on, those different industries and the issues that they're having and how they're wanting to dive in and especially understanding their fear around it because, that post, I love that you brought it up because that is the fear, right? Is
Right.
like, well, we want to stay away from it because you never know, or it's public, or,
Right.
it's going to get us in trouble, things like that. And so I went to those very people and really needed to understand their position and the fear that they currently had so that I could figure out what problems I could actually solve. Because at the end of the day, that's a business, right?
Right.
You got to be doing something that solves somebody's problem.
Right. That's the basic premise of business. You're solving people's problems for profit, right?
Yeah.
So here's a couple questions that I have for you. Number one, small businesses. If they say, hey, this is not in the budget, I have
Yeah.
7 to 10 employees, and I don't have the budget to implement artificial intelligence to
Yeah.
automate certain tasks. How do you overcome that conversation?
Well, in all honesty, because I'm, primarily focused on like the small to medium businesses and the nonprofits, there's always going to be a budget.
Right.
I have some that if it's within their budget, we can go in and take care of things within a few months.
Mhm.
Some are like, hey, and I tell them, give me your budget so that I can work with you. Because at the end of the day, I want to give back. I mean, I have to
For
make
sure.
money,
Of course.
but because I got to live, right?
Right.
But at the end of the day, everything that I do in life actually revolves around giving back and
I can tell.
how I can help and support
Right.
and amp up. And so, and you're right, that was one of the biggest things I identified is that, most small businesses, most nonprofits, they do not have the budget for even, most of them don't even have like a regular tech person.
No.
Yeah, so
Right.
much less a budget to hire somebody to come in to help them utilize AI. So, and that's kind of where my AI and business operations tend to like mix and mingle because I have to understand their operations and I kind of have to help them, identify those bottlenecks and stuff before we can even start implementing because there's so many different AI technologies out there, so we have to really analyze things first. So whenever we look at our budget, if you can do 20 hours this month, cool. Let's see if,
Right.
that meshes with my schedule. But if we have to break that up into 5 hours a month over the next 6 to 12 months, we can try to do that too, just so we can get you where you need to be because I just love raising up small business. I'm a small business myself, so I
Exactly.
love doing
So,
it.
and I would imagine too, there's a couple different things that you can, I don't want to say sell them on, but you can tell them that this would be a benefit for them. Number one,
Yeah.
employee burnout, right, is a big thing, right? So, if you are that small business owner, it's family owned, they're pulling God knows how many hours a day in a week. And
Yeah.
so you're like, hey, this can be taken off your plate and be automated, and you don't have to dedicate the resources to it. And then number two, let's say
Yeah.
you're not a subject matter expert in that particular field that you're doing something in, right? Like,
Mhm.
for example, this podcast alone, you find out really quick, you're not Mr. Social Media savvy guy. It's a lot more complicated than you think that it is, right? And you're like, I might
Yeah.
need to, because it's not just about making a post, right? That's why they have software out
Yeah.
there, right? And you're not inauthentic by utilizing those things because some of us get ludded, like, right?
Mhm.
You're like, no, I want to kind of hold on to this a little bit because it's mine, right? And you're like, to that small
Yeah.
business owner, you're like, this is going to be a benefit for you because it's going to free up 10, 20, 15 hours a week for you.
I mean, and again, this kind of meshes all into the technology and the operations. I had this one company that's a prime example of what you're talking about. A small business, they had 9 employees. I mean, great. They had great tenure. These employees were there forever because that family really took care of their people, right? But at the end of the day, these employees were working way harder than they should. I tell people all the time, the technology, no matter if it's AI or not, is not there to take over your job because
Hmm.
there's going to always have to be somebody that's working it, right? So
Hmm.
let's say like the accountant that, was taking care of their stuff. They had an in-house finance person
Right.
but that person was mainly still operating on just spreadsheets and some QuickBooks online here and there.
Right.
And I'm like, no wonder you are pulling 50, 60 hours a week because, you're not utilizing the tools that could help you. I almost
Exactly.
see technology pieces, especially AI, as like assistive technology. It's
Absolutely.
you're putting it into place so that you can focus on what needs to be focused on. Why spend 60 hours a week, having your finance person just going through transactions and all this kind of stuff whenever they could be helping you put your money where it needs to be in the company so you can grow it.
Right. Right. And they do forecasting models and data analytics and things like that, right? So it's not just about what accounting ledger you're trying to fix for the previous week, previous month, payroll.
Exactly.
Like if you can automate, certain things from tax structures, now you can actually look at cost savings within the company itself and then focus on, potentially finding more clients, customers, or market share as opposed to just being bogged down in an Excel file.
Yeah, well, I mean, and especially whenever you look at with small businesses, most of the time, a lot of employees wear a lot of different hats, right?
Right.
Um, and we can talk back and forth all day on whether that's right or not, but all businesses start somewhere. And when
Exactly.
you have those team members wearing those different hats, I mean, it's because they're there to help grow. So why not make their jobs a little bit easier? It
Hmm.
doesn't mean that we're just setting it and forgetting it.
Hmm.
It's really just giving them the tools that they need to thrive within their position and so that they can like operate in their zone of genius
Right.
without,
That's a very
these
good point.
yeah, I mean, and that way they don't have all these things holding them back. I mean, if you're operating, even if you're maybe a client manager or something like that, but you're operating out of spreadsheets and manually doing,
Right.
your project creation on every single one, that is more time that you could be spending maybe touching base with your clients,
Absolutely.
selling more, growing, networking. And that's really the point of everything, of all of it.
Do you have a preferred software that you utilize for artificial intelligence? I know there's a plethora of them out there right now. You know.
It really just depends on what you're wanting to do. But, and mind you, I'm not a partner. I'm not a partner with it with any of these, so I'm
Right.
not making any money off of this. I didn't know I should be because it is my favorite thing ever.
Yeah, yeah,
My
yeah.
gosh. So I don't know if you heard of Gamma?
I have not, but I'm about to find out.
You about to find out.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, let me tell you. Let's say it can do like one pagers, PDFs, small like landing pages and
Hmm.
presentations, right?
Right.
But let's say I have a webinar coming up, and let me tell you, one of my weaknesses is developing a presentation. Like I'm a perfectionist when it comes to it. I will second guess everything. Does it flow? Does it work?
Right.
But I
Right.
can
Right.
create an outline very well. I mean, I can create an outline all day long.
Yeah.
So Gamma, you can go in and you create. They call them Gammas. You go in and you can literally like paste a 2, 3 page outline of what you're talking about, speaking about, whatever, and it's gonna do that for you. And I don't mean some of these other programs that are just copying and pasting the stuff into like a template. No, you go in, you choose your theme,
Mm.
and within seconds, it's built.
Beautiful.
It
Beautiful.
is the most amazing application I've ever seen,
That's
as far
crazy.
as like that's concerned.
Nice. Nice. Well, and that's the thing, right? So, like, if you're like, it's almost like I'm not a musician, but if you're a great singer but you're not a great songwriter, I'm not saying you should,
Yeah,
I'm not saying you should have AI write your songs, but a complementary thing to your
yeah,
skill set is sometimes better to have, and I don't want to diss
yes,
musicians because writing a song is very hard, but
So hard.
But it's more or less what I mean by that is you get to stick at what you're great at. So maybe you have to have a songwriting
Yeah.
team or you need to hook up with somebody who writes great songs so you can do that. And
Mhm.
you're doing that the same thing with businesses because the business owner can say, listen, I'm great at talking to people, great at sales, but I really am rotten at
Yeah.
accounting and cash flow operations, right? And so,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, even down to things, like their marketing and this, that, and the other, until they get to a point. I had this conversation with a social media manager recently, and we both agreed. I was like, because I don't want to step on your toes. I said, but until they get to a point where they can afford to hire on that expertise,
mhm,
that expert that can really get them where they're going, there still has to be something in place.
absolutely.
And so that's where these technologies come in. I had an individual who I just created a simple GPT for them. I taught it all about them and their business and their voice and, all the things because, he's in a field. I can't actually say what he does, but
It's
he's in
all
a
good.
field
It's okay. Yeah.
to which that is his specialty. And he
Right.
was like, I can't stand social media. He said, I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea what to say. I really just want to put out there every post and just be like, hey, this is what I do. Hire me.
Right. Right. Right.
So
But it's
I
much more
created this
complicated and
GPT.
nuanced than that.
Yes. Well, I created this GPT for him,
Yeah.
and he goes in like every other week or so, and
Hmm.
he's just like, "Hey, give me some ideas." And the thing is, and I recommend to everyone, you never just like copy and paste from any sort of AI. So he goes in, and gives them a couple of posts. He says, "Oh, cool," and he spends about 10 minutes just making edits, and then he schedules them up on the scheduler, and he's good to go.
Beautiful, beautiful, wonderful.
Yeah.
And the other thing about it is too is that you're mitigating time, and I think a lot of people don't understand that. Obviously it's gotten out of control because if this was in college when I was in college, it'd be a different story, right? They'd probably be looking, they'd be looking at my transcripts a little bit, but
Right.
I do think it's a tool to utilize to get you to a quicker destination point, and I think that the
Yeah.
fear of it all, just briefly, like for example, businesses and companies, I would imagine some of the
Yeah.
resistance when you said legal, reasons, they don't have the
Yeah.
budget to handle a lawsuit, in
Yep.
case of data privacy, mishandling information, putting out a liable something that could be liable or slander of some sort. So,
Yeah.
how do you navigate those complexities for companies?
It varies upon the industry that they're in, but honestly, what it all boils down to is a really good AI policy. Every company needs it, small, big, large. I don't care who you are. Your company needs an AI policy because your policy simply, I mean, especially now,
My goodness.
cannot be don't use AI. Something's going to happen. First off, you're going to be left behind in the time.
Right.
Second off, your employees are going to see these things out there that can help them,
Right.
and they're going to want to utilize them, and they're going to unintentionally get your company in trouble by utilizing those. So the best thing to do is to, look at your industry,
Mhm.
look at the laws, local, federal, everything that's surrounding it, and then create an AI policy and then empower your team. Say, these are the ones that you can use that are compliance for us, and this is how you can use them. So that at the end of the day, they also don't feel like you're holding them back. I got a lot of that whenever I first step into companies and we start talking about it. Some of the employees would talk about how they feel held back because they know
Handcuffs
that
them.
there's stuff that can help them.
Right.
Yeah. And they're like, I'm afraid to get in trouble.
Right.
But, I mean, at the end of the day, I also don't want to have to always manually do this.
Right. I do have a question though. So you're dealing with business
Yeah.
owners, a lot family owned. So typically, like and I say this respectfully, it's got to be hard to change the mindset because if you are that, that owner that's it's family owned and that person's been hands on for 50,
Yeah.
since their grandfather, now their father, now them, and they're like, hey, I hate to say this to you, but it's time to take that baby out of your arms a little bit. Like, how does that conversation actually take place?
Honestly, like I said, it all starts with just going in and looking at their processes. I tell them straight up, I'm not here to sell you AI. Maybe you already have. I've run into this. Maybe you already have the technologies in place that would actually streamline your business,
Hmm.
but you're just not using them to their
Hmm.
fullest capability. So really that conversation just looks like, what are your frustrations?
Right.
I might not even suggest an AI tool. I've gone in before and I'm like, hey, actually, your people just need some training,
Yeah. Yeah.
or maybe you need some training,
Yeah,
And so that's really what it looks like. But most of the people that I speak with are stuck. They're stuck or they're ready for growth or they know they have potential or, maybe somebody even in the company has said, maybe we need to just take a look at this. So I'm not there to step on toes. I'm not there to revamp your company from A to Z because your company is your company. What I'm there to do is to basically help your company thrive and identify what we can do to help it thrive.
right. And the thing is, too, is I'm sure you've had customers or clients, whichever you refer to them as, is maybe they weren't prepared this year and then they see all their competitors or the people around them demanding
Mm,
certain services, right? Like if you're a restaurant, right, and there was a restaurant near me, for example, that never took debit cards, right? Old school, cash
mhm,
only. Well, if you need to get these younger people into the fold, they got Tap, Google Pay, Apple Pay,
mhm.
and even though they were looking at, they didn't want to pay the 3.5%, 5% surcharge. At the
Yeah.
end of the day, that's where it has to be for you to get people in and out of the door and to be able to
Yeah.
generate more customers because people still leave, you know.
Yeah. Well, and it comes down to a bit of an analysis, really. It's how many customers are you missing? If you
Right.
realistically only see one a day that comes through that, is trying to use card and
Right.
can't, then hey, maybe keep that going.
Hmm.
But whenever you're realistically looking at your company and saying, how much business am I missing because of this?
Right. Right.
That's where you have to start saying, okay, then something needs to change. If you're
Hmm.
turning away 30 people a day, that totally makes up for the
Without
percentage of
question.
surcharge,
Without
with
question.
no questions asked.
Right, and then it's also speed of service that you're starting to provide too, right? So now you're
Yeah.
not there's a till, you don't have to make the extra bank run. That's a little other detail, but
Hmm.
you get my point. Some businesses, and even though they're successful, kind of had to get brought up to the times. Like, listen, you can resist all
Yeah.
you want, but this is the way things are going. So that's very useful, particularly when it comes to your skill set. Is it just you in the company, or do you have any other employees or assistants?
So I have an assistant of mine that she's kind of in training on that front, mainly because she helps me out so much. So she's picked up on a lot of stuff. But
Because you need to make
she's
sure
like,
that you don't get burned out either.
yes, exactly. But yeah, so she does things like, honestly, the biggest help, and it sounds so small, but she helps to like man my schedule. And she
Right.
knows, because if not, I will. I mean, I'll pack my schedule full and I'll go back to back and then I'll reach a burnout where, I used to, for a week, I'd be like, nope, I got to reschedule everyone this week because I can't function. So she kind of helps me maintain, that balance.
Good. Good.
Because, yeah, like I said, I'm out here to help people. And whenever I'm pouring so much, she basically is here to make sure that I'm also getting poured into.
Now, are your clients just local South Carolina, or have you expanded outside of your respective state?
So mainly here in South Carolina, I've had a client. Let's see, I had like one in Georgia, one
Mhm.
in North Carolina. So kind of just the southeast region,
For sure.
right now. And I think that a lot of that revolves around. I could take on, further clients. Like I had one that I did some stuff for over in like Colorado, right?
Mhm.
Most of what I do can be done remotely, but there's something to be said, especially whenever it comes to small businesses.
Personal.
Yeah, for that in person, even I've gone into businesses before and I'm like, you know what? I just need a day where I'm shadowing your people and looking at, what all they do. And I feel like there's a lot to be said for that. I
For
learned
sure.
so much more and I can truly help them hands on being able to go in person.
That makes a lot of sense. And the thing is too is
Hmm.
that small businesses obviously I think they would prefer in person as opposed they don't have the big
Yeah.
conference room and all the bells and whistles. They're going to be like, hey, there's my office back here. Let's sit down and talk, right? So,
Yeah.
which is awesome. So I got to ask, what's your background to get into this field? Like, what did you? Was it
Yeah.
technical school? I don't anything in particular.
Well, I actually, so I used to be a director of marketing, and that kind
Awesome.
of was my dive into technology because you gotta
Oh my goodness.
when you're doing that, you learn a lot. But I've always been a technical mind, and
Yeah.
so a couple years back, prior to my brain surgery, I got certified in full stack development.
Wonderful.
really with the AI stuff up until like the past 2 years or so, it's all been hands on. It's all been learning,
Nice.
developing. I'm actually in the works of like developing my own certification program for people to become an AI strategist
Nice.
because it's not just about AI. They have to understand business. They have to understand how
R-
to help businesses and
Right.
how to understand different industries and their flows and processes and policies and compliance. There's so much more that goes into it. And I had that piece.
Yeah.
So when I started really diving into AI, it was really more just a compliment to it,
Wonderful.
and it was like, if
Wonderful.
I learned this, man, I could make an impact, you
That's
know?
and the one thing I loved your quote. It was be scared, do it anyway. I thought that that was one of the
Yep.
most wonderful. Like it was straight to the point. Like it's 5 words, right? And it's like be
Yeah.
scared, do it anyway. And there's something to be said, particularly I don't want to talk too much about your medical condition, but you did bring that
No,
out.
you're good.
It's almost like once you had that moment, you found your purpose, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right? You found your true purpose, and I thought that was wonderful that you mentioned that.
I think that I really think that on some level or another, always knew what my purpose was. But there's so much fear surrounding like, you want financial stability. You want, especially whenever you're opening a business, how am I supposed to do everything? How do I even get started? There's just so much that encapsulates all of that. And I don't know, I just remember my second brain surgery. I remember sitting there, and at that point I still had like a W-2 position, but my company was taking off to where, I mean, it was basically, 20, 30 hours a week. So I had been debating back and forth. Do I make that jump? Do I, and that's what it was. I was like, I
Right.
can be scared. I
Right.
said, I can be scared of this. It's okay for me to fear it because there's a lot to fear when it comes into it. I was like, but you know what? I'm just going to do it. I was like, I'm going
Hmm.
to do it. I'm going to jump in head first. And worst case, I
Nice.
fail. I can always get another job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Right.
So go ahead.
But the opportunity to do that wasn't going to be there forever.
Exactly. The opportunity wasn't going to be there forever. And, I mean, I'm not diving too deep in, but like my time here is probably more so limited than a lot others. And I had someone ask me, they said, if you were lying, and this sounds so cliche, but if you're lying on your deathbed, right? Like, not really regret so much, but like, what do you think would be coming to your mind,
Without
whether
question.
personal or professional? Like, yeah, what would you have wanted to do or experience or see? And honestly, that was the one thing that kept coming to my mind is I would have hated the fact that I'd let fear hold me back from things personally and professionally. You
Absolutely,
know?
absolutely, and more importantly, it's. I always reuse the reference because I do martial arts, right? So I'm a black belt in karate. This isn't about me. This is about you. But I'd rather be in the actual sparring session, getting my butt handed to me, than me
Yes.
sitting watching it, right? Because it's easy to critique. It's easy to say
Yeah.
that person should have performed better. It's easy to
Mhm.
whatever the case may be. But when you jump in and you really actually have to do it, you could be like, yeah, that was the best 3 minute butt kicking I ever got in my entire life. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
It really is.
Well, and I really do try to like, I mean, in the same sense, professionally and personally, I try my best to figure out the lessons and think, hey, sometimes there's no lessons. Sometimes something just happens.
Absolutely.
But at the
Absolutely.
end of the day, I'm like, what can I learn? And will I regret that experience, even if I do get my butt kicked? Am I going to regret that experience? Heck no.
Right,
It's
right.
a story I'm going to be able to tell.
Exactly. And and that's the thing is about it is that, you would much rather find a way to sit back and say that I learned from that than to never
Yeah.
have tried it to begin with. And I think you're a story of resilience and, more importantly, I think you're at the forefront of some cutting technology and obviously I'm sure your clients love your personality because I'm having a blast talking to you, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny. I've always been a people person, and
Yeah.
for years though, I was just on the back end. I always kept myself kind of, behind the scenes
Right.
whenever I was working, even like my job and my side gig and all this
Hmm.
kind of stuff. And it's funny now that I've kind of like stepped out. I had a contact of mine, someone that's very dear to me. She's in my network, and she was like, I just had someone message me and was like, who's Kayla Williams? And I was like,
Nice.
And she's
Nice.
like, your voice is getting out there. And it's
Beautiful.
funny because that was my goal.
Right.
One of my personal goals was just, I was like, I just want to be heard. I said,
Absolutely.
I want to get my voice out. I want people to hear all my knowledge that I have. I want them to hear my experience. I want to inspire. I want to support and just, man, I said, I got a lot to say.
Well, that's honestly one of the reasons I started this podcast, right? Because I've told other people and other guests, that I'm like, listen, I'm not smart enough to do what you do, right? But the one thing that I do
Mm,
is I always my mind's always running. I'm like, okay, I if
yeah.
you saw me at a barbecue or somewhere, getting drinks, you'd be like, who is that guy that references all this random silly stuff that nobody really knows, right? Like I'm serious, right? Like I'll know about like the Colossus of Rhodes, or I'll know about like the siege of Kaffa, right? And they'll be like, "What is that?" I'm like, "I don't know, but it's something really cool that I learned." So my mind's always spinning like that. So that's why I started this, because I'm like, I got to get this off my chest, man.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I absolutely love it because I'm the same way. People tell me that I am just full of the most random knowledge.
Yeah.
And but it's also because, and if any of your listeners walk away with anything, honestly, it's of course don't let fear hold you back, but
Hmm.
also never stop learning.
No question.
That's
No question.
probably my biggest thing. I'm always, even if it's not relevant to like what I'm doing, I'm like, this is interesting,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I love learning
Yes.
about new things and about people and what they do. It's so
Yes.
fascinating because I feel like whenever you're growing up and you're going into adulthood, right? Like
Yes.
you're going through maybe high school, college, you're still only exposed to so many different careers and
Absolutely.
different things in life. And then you become an adult and you're like, man, I didn't even know that this existed.
Exactly, right, because your county or your state becomes your world, right? And
Yeah.
you can become zip code or area coded, so to speak. And you're like, no, like it's,
Yes.
like take a bird's eye view perspective and realize that there's lots of things that you don't know, and that's okay. And and now that you have all these different tools at your disposal, it's quicker than ever. You just have to make sure that
Mm.
with anything else, it's a tool. It's not the end all be all. You have to still research a little deeper just because you got an answer in front of you.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly that. And the most fantastic part is that because I talk to all of these people, I mean, I tell people all the time one of my biggest strengths is problem solving.
Hmm.
But that means that if I can't find the answer, I can find the person that has the answer
Right,
because I
right,
firmly believe in operating in my specialty. I'm not gonna be trying to do other things that people
for
are
sure.
doing because I know what I'm doing, but I might know them and I can
Exactly,
get you.
and which is just as smart too. Just before we go, I just have to know, for people who
Yeah.
are listening, how can they find Kayla Williams?
Yeah, so honestly, just my website. It's
Like,
twisted-ai.net.
dope
I'm
name.
also on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to
Yeah.
find on there. If you look up Kayla Williams or Twisted Consulting, I'm right there.
That's awesome. So I'll tell you what, I'll certainly be looking more at the website as well too. I'll be interested to see how
Yeah,
you grow. I'll be following your posts as well too, because they're all positivity, and that's what the world needs more of. So I really appreciate
yeah,
your time, and it's been a joy. And if you want to AI me, so I'm looking forward to the opportunity to be AI.
yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes,
Do you mind before we hop off? I also want to say that if they want to know more about my nonprofit, it's
please.
autoserviceassist.org, and they
Yes,
can find out what we do.
absolutely, for sure. And thank you so much, Kayla Williams, for being on the Tron podcast. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.